Hello.
How are
Hey,
you?
is this Ethan?
Yes, it is.
Hey, how's it going, man? This is Sergeant McGaughey, Air Force Reserve recruiter from Richmond. How can I be of service to you guys today?
Hi. So we had some questions about your time in the service and your what your AFSC is, what boot camp was
Yes.
like, what tech school was like, just those kind of questions, you know?
Okay, yeah. So, pretty much my experience. So, I ended up joining the Air Force. I'm originally from Canton, Ohio. I joined the Air Force when I was around 19 years old. I ended up actually joining first Air Force active duty, which is full-time Air Force. Right now, I'm actually recruiting for the reserve. But my experience was it was amazing. Like I got to travel places that I've never been before, meet people that you know were amazing. I got to learn a whole new job, like pretty much from the ground up, and I pretty much give all the praise to the Air Force, honestly, because when I was coming up, like I didn't have any kind of formal training or anything. I was coming straight out of high school. I was working at a potato chip factory, and I just wasn't cutting it. I was thinking about maybe doing college, but kind of like my brother and my sister before me, they didn't really work out so well. So I was like, you know what, let me try doing like some work on the outside, and yeah, it didn't end up panning out because I wasn't really proud of packing potato chips into boxes. So essentially, like I got trained up as an electrician.
Oh, okay.
The Air Force specialty code for that was a 3 Echo 031, I believe. And I did that for about 7 or 8 years or so. Pretty much it was very extensive. Like I ended up getting trained on how to do interior wiring, exterior wiring, any kind of like electrical maintenance around any kind of commercial or residential households. I learned how to do airfield lighting, like how to maintain the runways, fire alarm panels, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it was very extensive, very rewarding. I've been stationed pretty much all over. My first base, I ended up going to South Korea. I was there for a year, and then after that, I was kind of, I guess you could say I was kind of like by Orlando, Florida. That was like the closest base to that. I was there for a couple of years, and then I ended up going to Dover, Delaware, which not really a whole lot to do, particularly in Delaware, but I mean, you got to think about it. It has a metropolitan area that it's surrounded by, so it's like you drive 2 hours, anywhere. You're gonna be in like Washington D.C., New York City, Philadelphia, wherever the case may be. So yeah, it's a good little travel hub, I'd say. But yeah, I mean, ultimately after that, I ended up finding myself in a recruiting gig. They pretty much said, hey, we want to nominate you for a special duty. And then they kind of had me rack and stack the different special duties they had. They had like a drill sergeant. I think some of it was like military training leader, which is essentially like the people that kind of help out the individuals when they get to their technical school training. But recruiter was on the list, and I was like, you know what? I think that might be a pretty good gig for me because I'm a people person. I like talking with people, and I like helping people. So, but that's kind of like, that's the gist of it. Hopefully that kind of answers your question. I've been in for like 10 years now. So.
Okay, wow.
And I'm sure your electrical technical skills translate to the civilian world too, right?
Yeah, so as it so happens, like you pretty much get trained exactly how the civilian side would. So whenever the time comes where I do turn in my, I guess you could say, helmet for a hard hat or whatever you want to call it, I mean, you're going to be able to transfer all those skills. Like you have like training that you do, it's all documented, and you can like with certain companies, like you'll turn that in, you'll have your resume, you'll have all your credentials, and they'll actually pay you measurable to the amount of like experience and time that you actually have. And it really just depends on the company and stuff. But like I know people that were like electricians with me, and they were making close to 6 figures a year when they ended up getting out or whatever they kind of pursued. I mean, honestly, if you choose to stay in, it's also rewarding. It just depends. But yeah, I mean, right now I don't recruit for full-time active duty anymore. I recruit for the part-time. And why the part-time might be kind of more beneficial for certain people, it really just depends on people's situation.
Yeah.
We provide the flexibility. So it's like, for active duty Air Force, like so that's full time Air Force, you could to be uprooted from your your friends and your family, and you could be gone for quite a while. I mean, you're probably missing out on certain important events. You can't always you can't have a full control over your life, right? So it's like you got to be kind of okay with that and adapt with the changes, roll with the punches, and essentially that's kind of how active duty Air Force will. Full-time pay, full-time job, full-time benefits. However, you'd be gone, missing out on a lot of events like that. So it's not always the best for some people, and it really just depends. But I mean, on the reserve side, though, they offer that flexibility where it's like if you want to serve close to home, you can stay close to your home. You can serve at a local base. You can choose your base. That's not where the Air Force pretty much, because like what they'll say in Air Force active duty. Like full time, they'll be like, oh yeah, you can rack and stack your locations on a quote unquote dream sheet. But I mean, I'll tell you what, like when I went in through Air Force basic training and I created my quote unquote dream sheet, I put like all stateside locations because I had a girlfriend at the time, and they sent me to Korea for my first base, so they don't really take that into consideration too much. So that's why I say, hey, if you want to actually be able to like have a control over where you're going, the reserve, you actually can choose where you're going, what job you're going to be doing, and also you can kind of like schedule, your, I guess you could say your basic training, your tech school, like when it's actually going to start. Well, the only thing that's expected of you is you just do that the 1 weekend a month and the 2 weeks out of the year. And essentially, what I like to tell people is like 95% of the time when you're active duty, you're military, and 5% it's like personal life or personal time. Whereas on the reserve side, it's like 95% you're pretty much a civilian. You're doing your own personal thing. And 5% of the military is really all it's taken from you. So, yeah, I mean, you're not going to be getting paid like an incredible amount of money
of course,
on the reserve side, but it's like it's going to be able to kind of accommodate, whatever you got going for your life. So let's say if you want to pursue school at a full-time rate, they can help you out financially by providing funds towards your schooling, and you can still pretty much go to school with like limited interruptions because you're not going to be working full-time for the military. So there's that. And then also, if you want to like maybe have like a full-time job lined up on the outside as well, you can have that and have the Air Force to support you and kind of have like a passive income on the side as well. So
now, did you get your CCAF degree after tech school?
So I didn't get it immediately after tech school. So pretty much how it works is as soon as you join the Air Force, you're automatically enrolled into the Community College of the Air Force, or CCAF. And essentially after that, you're already going to be receiving technical credits towards your actual associate's degree in the field that you're actually like, the job that you're doing. So for me, I got like, I think it was anywhere from 20 to 30 credits, like technical credits, and it was an applied science and an associate of applied science and electrical mechanical technology. And the rest of it was pretty much up to me. So it's like, if I wanted to knock out a few general courses here and there, that's pretty much all that was left. And then eventually I got my CCAF degree. So, and then are you gentlemen familiar with like the AU ABC program at all?
I am. I can't speak for Luke though. From my understanding, it's like you complete your CCAF at your 2-year degree at the CCAF, and then you transfer it for a 4-year degree institution.
Correct. Yeah. So why it's advantageous to complete your CCAF is because 60 of those credits very well could transfer into a bachelor's degree of your choice. So it's like, let's say this, right? Let's say you get a career field where it's like, it wasn't my favorite, or maybe you end up like not liking it the most. It's okay, because like whatever that degree is, it doesn't really matter because you can roll 60 of those credits into a bachelor's degree of your choice. Like, let me give you an example, right? So with me being an electrician, honestly, like to be real honest with you, I don't really see myself being an electrician the rest of my life. It's just it wasn't really my kind of thing. There were people that were a lot better than me, and like it was pretty noticeable. I was better with kind of like talking with people, doing administrative work and stuff like that. So I'm like, what? Since I'm doing recruiting and I excel in recruiting, let me go ahead and roll 60 of my credits into a bachelor's degree in human resources management, because it makes more sense to pursue something like that in a field that I'm in right now. So that's what I ended up doing. So instead of having 120 credits that I had to accomplish for a bachelor's, it was only 60 credits. So it actually helped quite a bit.
Where are you finishing the 4-year degree, if you don't mind me asking?
So they're not actually at like in residence courses. So most of the time, like I guess you could say like on the active duty side, like when you're actually doing full time, like you're going to really only be doing online courses. So my university is the University of Arizona Global Campus, and they typically do military very well, where all the classes are 100% distance learning. So it's like, yeah, I mean, most of that has been taken care of by the Air Force with just tuition assistance funds alone. However, if you're trying to pursue like a degree at, let's say, like an in-residence college campus or like a university, the Air Force won't like fully pay for that. Like the Air Force Reserve won't fully pay for that, but they will be able to kind of help you out financially and be able to support you. It just depends. So because like in-residence courses are going to be a little bit more on the pricey side, and also depending on like how prestigious the university is, that kind of thing.
Of course, yeah. Could you use your GI Bill to cover the remaining tuition?
So when it comes to the GI Bill, I did want to kind of clarify how that works. So the GI Bill, we have two different ones in the reserve side, and then I'll let you know how active duty works versus the reserve.
Okay, yeah.
So for the reserve, we have the Montgomery GI Bill, which pretty much what they'll do is they'll pay $439 per month. They'll pay that to you if you're doing school at a full-time rate. If it's like you're pursuing it at like maybe a part-time rate, then they're probably going to cut that in half. But keep in mind that is before taxes, but that'll be direct deposits that go straight to your bank account. And then as far as, have you guys ever heard of a kicker incentive job or no?
No, sir.
No.
Okay, so pretty much we have like high-need career fields where it's like if you can fill it, you can like be otherwise qualified for it. We will offer you a kicker incentive, which is like an additional $350 per month on top of that $409 if you're pursuing school at a full-time rate. And as long as you qualify and you pick that job, then you'll get that $350 coming in each time. And on top of that, you're going to get paid for your drill weekends, which is it's roughly starting out like a little bit over 200 because it's really only one weekend a month. But I mean, all things considered, if you're pursuing school at a full-time rate with a Montgomery GI Bill, that'd be like about $1,000 extra in your pocket just from kind of doing the reserve. So that's something to consider. And then also I wanted to kind of let you guys know that the benefits are only good for 36 months of use. So it's like if you're going to use it at that time, then you pretty much use it at that time. And also on top of that, what else is there? Oh, then we also have the tuition assistance that's on top of that as well, where it's like that $4,500 per year. But as far as the more technical degree, the more technical GI Bill, just kind of try to bear with me here. It is kind of complex, but how it works on the reserve side, it's you probably heard of it. It's like post 9/11 GI Bill, and it's going to be based on pretty much how much time of active duty you actually have served. So anytime you go to like an extended period away from home, I guess you could say on the reserve side, that would be considered active duty. So like when you're in basic training, that's active duty time. Tech school, that's active duty time. If you were to deploy, that's active duty time. But essentially, if you can hit at least 5 months of active duty time, you would be eligible for the minimum amount of like 50% of a staff sergeant or E5 BAH. Do you guys know what BAH is or not?
Basic allowing for housing?
Yeah, exactly. So like depending on like where you live, I mean, actually it's going to be based on the school. So wherever the school is located, it kind of goes and gives you half of that housing allowance. So and that would go direct deposit as well. And then on top of that, whatever the school's tuition is, you would have half of the school's tuition covered as long as you can hit that 5 months of active duty, which most people should. Even as a traditional reservist, because you would be able to hit the 2 months. I mean, roughly basic training is about 2 months. It's like 7.5 weeks long, and then tech school, depending on like what your job is, that would be, however long it could be. Like my tech school was about 6 months. However, this one takes like maybe 2 months or whatever. So it really just depends on what you get yourself into. But I mean, ultimately, you could probably hit that 5 month mark, no problem. So that's like the bare minimum. So it's 50% of the BAH for a staff sergeant for that particular area the school's in, and then 50% of the school's tuition as well. So if you were to go active duty, right, like that's 36 months is the maximum. So 36 months of active duty would get you to that 100% mark, where your GI Bill would 100% cover your tuition assistance for that 36 months usage. And you could do it that way as well. So like a lot of people, what they'll do is they'll go active duty Air Force first. They'll do, maybe they'll put school on hold. Maybe they'll pursue school while they're in. It doesn't really matter either way. As long as they meet that 36-month mark of like active duty service served, then they technically are eligible to do that post 9/11 GI Bill and get 100% of the BAH and 100% of the school tuition.
Interesting. Okay. So when I contacted you earlier, you had mentioned that you had some intel jobs available. What are the intel jobs? What do they do? How long is tech school? That type of thing.
So I'm not 100% familiar on like all the different intel jobs that we offer, because it's kind of like we have a vacancy system where pretty much you'll have a list that comes out from week to week. Sometimes it can kind of change depending on like, it's kind of like a first come, first serve list type deal. So depending on who's eligible and qualified at that time, maybe they'll book a job. But essentially, I'll kind of paint a picture based off of a recent experience that I had. So I recently enlisted someone in the Air Force Reserve that they wanted to kind of go into cybersecurity. However, we didn't have cyber spots available at the time, but they settled for an intel job. And I saw like a handful of them at Langley Air Force Base. So if you're not familiar, it's by Virginia Beach. But essentially, he ended up booking a geospatial intelligence job for an analyst, which pretty much it's kind of like where he'd be kind of just like checking out the different images and kind of seeing like, I'm not super good at explaining these kind of things because I never once was an intel troop myself, but I guess like the big picture is they're going to be able to spot if there's any kind of like terrorist activity, or if the enemy is moving in close, or, just stuff that's kind of like on the up and up, like very top secret type stuff, classified type of things. And if you do get an intel career field, that would pretty much guarantee you a top secret clearance, which that's usually what the CIA, NSA, all that kind of stuff is looking for on the outside as far as hiring individuals. I mean, if you have direct experience with intelligence, that's something that could be directly applicable. So the thing is, with the Air Force, it doesn't matter which component you're talking about. We have three things that we offer. One is quality of life. I mean, you could pretty much ask any kind of veteran you've probably ever known, whether they went Army, Marines, whatever the case may be. Whenever they go to an Air Force base, it's like they're on vacation or whatever, and they go to the Air Force housing or the Air Force food. So quality of life is the one thing we have. The second thing is, transferability. So it's just like, like any job that you pretty much get in the Air Force, like you're going to be able to directly apply that to the outside next to you. It's not like you're going into infantry and it's like, what the heck am I going to do with this on the outside? So, I mean, it's like they actually hook you up for success, and it's like a really great stepping stone to your next kind of career progression. But I'm going to be honest with you, I don't remember the third thing, but those are two things that I typically say. So overall, though, you're going to be pretty much a hot comedy. Sorry, I'm not even saying the correct word.
You're fine.
But you kind of understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, of course.
The veterans preference system, like when it comes to federal hiring agencies, you're going to get veteran preference just from being a veteran in general. And then if you have all this experience to boot, not to mention like a top secret clearance or whatever, I mean, that's like you're a shoo-in. Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, hopefully that somewhat kind of touches on your points. I mean, I know that there's like all source intelligence, there's geospatial intelligence, there's cryptological linguist intelligence, where it has to do with like learning like a new foreign language.
Yeah, so that's something I was interested in, the cryptologic linguist.
Yeah, so I'm not entirely sure what the spots look like as of right now, but when I was active duty Air Force, that actually was something that as long as you like qualified for that job and you took it's called a D-Lab test. It's like defense language
I think it's Defense Language Aptitude Battery Test.
Yeah, exactly. If you can get pretty much a passing score on that and also meet those ASVAB requirements, you're pretty much a shoo-in. I mean, like other than that, I mean, you're going to have to academically qualify, but then also physically qualify. I don't know if that's something that you guys kind of are already familiar with, but but on the academic side, as long as you pass on the active duty realm, you pretty much get that job booked for you, because it's called a hard to fill career field, and when you qualify for a hard to fill career field, it's pretty much a guarantee that you're going to get that job. It's just a matter of whenever the opening hits. So that's something that active duty does. I don't know how reserve works for that. Okay. I think it's going to just be based on if they have a position available. But yeah, there's a few things that it entails. But are you guys familiar at all with like how the physical standards have changed and the medical standards with like qualifying into the military process?
Not really, sir.
Not really, no.
Okay, so I'll take a little bit of time to kind of go over this, because this is important to know. I mean, if you're planning on sharing this with the rest of the class and that kind of thing. But pretty much how it works is like the military recruitment, no matter like which branch you're dealing with, Department of Defense wide, it was always kind of like based on the honor system. It was like, hey, is anything medically wrong with you? And then you'd be like, no, I'm completely healthy. And then I'd be like, all right, I believe you. And then we'd send you up to the military entry processing station. And essentially, if you kind of stick with your story, you know, there's no changes or there's nothing, I guess, noticeably wrong with you or noticeably unordinary, you know, you'd be fine. You get through the process, and the physical wasn't really that much of a big deal. Nowadays, they've implemented a new system. It's called Genesis. It's terrible. We're not a fan of it, but hey, it's absolutely necessary apparently. So essentially what happens is they will pull the last 10 years of your prescription history. So regardless of whether you pretty much say, hey, I'm healthy, you know, nothing's wrong with me, I don't got any prescriptions, essentially your prescription pull can sometimes say otherwise. So I've had it where I've set people up and then things have popped up, and then typically what you could expect with that is either you're going to receive a pretty decent delay because you're going to have to actually request those official medical records and then get them to the military entry processing station, and we have to like reevaluate, or it could be one of those things where it could be potentially a disqualifying condition. Like someone could be like, oh yeah, you know, I'm fine, but then, you know, maybe they actually end up having like a tumor or something like that, and we didn't know. So it's just one of those things where, you know, it's better to know that ahead of time going in before you kind of, you know, put all your hopes and dreams and aspirations into the Air Force, and then we essentially crush your dream. I mean, it's not my, you know, it's not my intent to crush people's dreams, but essentially at the end of the day, I can have someone who, you know, has dreamed of wanting to join the Air Force their entire life, and then when it gets to the medical, unfortunately, if they're disqualified, there's not really a lot I can do about that. So it's just good to know ahead of time. So.
Speaking about that, when a reservist enlists, do they go to basic training in Colorado Springs?
So, actually, I believe what you are referring to is the Air Force Academy. So that's like for individuals that go the officer route. That's Texas. Colorado Springs.
Texas. Okay, Texas. I'm sorry. I thought the
Air Force basic training's in Texas, right?
Yeah, so Air Force basic training, no matter if it's Guard, Reserve, Active Duty Air Force, they all go to this. Actually, even Space Force, they all go to Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio, Texas. And then that's 7.5 weeks long. And then like depending on what your job is for your tech school, that's going to depend on like where it's at, and then also like how long it's going to be as well, like I mentioned earlier. But to kind of talk a little bit on the officer side, if someone is pretty much, I guess you could say, like looking to do like the whole university route, and maybe not go the Air Force Academy route, you can kind of apply for a ROTC or an ROTC scholarship, and you can essentially join and be an officer that way, as long as everything goes good and you're otherwise qualified. And then the other way to be an officer is the Air Force Academy route, which is essentially, I think you have to get some type of congressional mandate. I'm not an officer recruiter by any means, but I know it's pretty extensive, and you got to be pretty much the cat's pajamas in order to get into the Air Force Academy. And then there is an alternative route if you like eventually aspire to be an officer, but let's say maybe you want to kind of get that hands-on experience first as an enlisted member. You can pretty much get your bachelor's degree, like kind of like how I'm doing, through the enlisted side, and then eventually you can kind of put in a package to commission. Just also keep in mind that it is going to be pretty competitive. However, you're going to have a little bit more of an advantage when you are prior enlisted rather than somebody coming off the street that wants to be an officer, because one, you have veterans preference, and two, you have that face-to-face interaction with your leadership. You build a reputation, you establish rapport. They know how you are and what your work ethic's like. So it's like you're more than likely going to hire the internal hire rather than the external hire, if that makes sense.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Is that something that you're planning on doing, submitting a package for commissioning?
So I thought about it at one point in time, but unfortunately, in my particular situation, my ASVAB scores were a little bit on the lower side. So if you do kind of struggle with the ASVAB, if it's like one of those things where you don't score a little bit higher than or above average, I would say it's probably not a realistic possibility for you to kind of go the officer route, because essentially what happens is when you apply to be an officer, you have to take an officer ASVAB version, I guess, where it's called the AFOQT, and essentially it's going to be a little bit more challenging than the ASVAB. So it's like, if you didn't do so hot in the ASVAB, then maybe that might not be the best route for you. But I mean, obviously, you got to kind of go about the hand that you're dealt, so to speak. So it's like, if you have good aptitude scores, then by all means, I'd say definitely shoot for the stars. If your aptitude scores are lacking and you can't necessarily improve that by retaking that, which was my case, then yeah, maybe don't go that route. But yeah, I mean, to each its own. I mean, like I said, their success comes in so many different shapes and sizes. So depending on like whatever your road to success is, I mean, it doesn't necessarily need to be an officer. Maybe it could be, hey, I'm going to utilize the Air Force for all of its benefits and its opportunities and the experience that I can gain to put on a resume, and then I'm going to have it take me to new heights or whatever. Maybe it's like, hey, I'm looking for an Air Force retirement and I want to stay in the Air Force. So, I mean, however success looks for you, we just kind of let that kind of orchestrate the way we go about it.
So are you currently considered active duty or reserve?
So it is complicated, my situation. So I was active duty for 10 years. I transferred into the reserve, but the reserve does have a component. It has a status that is actually an active duty status. It's called Active Guard Reserve. Because as you probably know, recruiters cannot be a part-time recruiter.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
So, so if you're a recruiter on the reserve, they do have full-time positions for that. Now, it's very similar to the officer type deal, where if you do want to like kind of enlist first, and let's say you want to get into a full-time. So here's the thing: the AGR, Active Guard Reserve, is the best of both worlds. Everybody wants it, and the reason why is because it has the full-time benefits with the full-time pay, but it also has that flexibility where you can choose your duty station of where you're actually serving. So it's almost like active duty with control. I mean, I guess you could say what I did with that control of where you can choose where you're at. So obviously, as you can imagine, everybody wants that. So it's going to be competitive. So it's like, it's the same thing as the officer. You know, everybody wants to be an officer. And everybody wants to make a little bit more money. So, you know, you would put your package up for that as well. And like, depending on your work ethic, your reputation, that kind of thing. Who knows? You might be able to secure a spot. And it doesn't necessarily mean you have to be a recruiter. It could be for a particular career field, whether it be a career field that you're currently serving in, or maybe it's something where maybe you would retrain and you would get involved into a different career field. Who knows?
Yeah, okay. Now, I also have a question about industry certifications. If one has an industry certification coming into the Air Force, like before enlisting, would that play any role in terms of what job they get or maybe their training?
So, I would say on the active duty side, that really, I mean, as like unfortunate as it is to say this, it doesn't really have much merit on the active duty side, and that's mainly because all of our positions are pretty much entry level hires. Like, we don't have like one of those things where like, oh, let me evaluate your resume and blah, blah. I mean, maybe Space Force possibly, but anything other than that, most of the time it's just like, hey, if you have certifications or whatever, it's like most of the time it's kind of like we'll kind of refer people to either go enlisted to officer route, or we'll say, hey, go like, you know, just straight to officer route. But to kind of answer your question on the reserve side, if you do have experience in a certain field, like we can kind of contact the different agencies and see if maybe they do have like vacancies or whatever. Maybe it might not be advertised or whatever, but we could see if they have vacancies. And as long as you otherwise qualify, we might be able to accommodate something. However, it's not like something where it's like it's not necessarily guaranteed. Most of the time, we want,
of course,
kind of flexible to the needs of the Air Force and what we can offer. But it's like, yeah, I mean, I guess if the stars align and there is openings in that field, and you do a little bit of networking and see if they need openings, then yeah, it's a possibility. It just depends. And like typically on the reserve side, they're looking for individuals that actually kind of know what they're doing. I mean, they will take entry level positions. Don't get me wrong, but I mean, they will say on the on like the job requirements, they'll say this, that, and the third is is preferred, but it's not necessarily a requirement. So it's like, yeah, it's not to say that they're not looking for people that are actually certified. It's one of those things where I guess you could say on the cybersecurity side, right? So I know for active duty on the cybersecurity side, if you have your, I don't know like what they're called, but it's like specific certification.
Yeah, so like it's like DoD 8570, I think is the directive.
Okay. Yeah, so pretty much you can come in with a sign-on bonus if you have those like specific like codes and certifications and that kind of thing. Yeah. However, it's like if you're an entry-level cyber hire, you're probably just going to come in with like a standard contract. So it really just depends. And then also for I think it's the cryptological linguist, whether it be airborne or ground, they're offering a sign-on bonus for that as well. And that's entry-level hire. It doesn't actually have to have any kind of certifications prior. It's just the fact that it's a hard-to-fill career field. And then additionally, on top of that, for special warfare hires, just the fact that it's just such a rigorous pipeline, if you can actually get through both components where it's like you get it through basic training, you get through the tech school, and then also like the course that kind of follows after that. Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty hefty bonus. I mean, I know it changes from year to year, but
of course,
yeah.
I asked because I have one of those certifications on the list, and I was just wondering if you knew anything about it.
So, what certification in particular? Is it like a cyber one? Or?
Yeah, it's a cybersecurity one. It's a CompTIA Security Plus.
Okay, I mean, honestly, I couldn't really tell you right now. Like, I'm not really looking at my computer. It's usually what I typically look up. But I mean, it is one of those things where I mean, you could, like either through me or through somebody else. I'm not entirely sure if the reserve. I mean, I'm gonna be honest with you, man. I've been doing the reserve gig about 2 months now, so it is limited as far as my knowledge goes. The active duty side, though, like they'll probably be able to kind of pull it up and they'll see like, okay, does he have this particular certification? And they can like actually look in the actual regulation and check. But yeah, as of right now, I'm not entirely sure. But I mean, hey, if it's you said it's Security Plus or whatever.
Security Plus, yes.
Okay, yeah. I mean, from what I understand in my time on active duty, that sounded pretty legitimate. So more than likely that it was the case.
It's one of you have to get it when you go to Keesler Air Force Base for tech school for like 1B AFSC 1 Bravo 4 and some of the 3 Delta shreds.
Okay.
But I wasn't sure like how much that would change in the reserves, if any.
Yeah, and just so you know, like moving forward, the 3 Deltas actually transform their Air Force specialty codes into, I think it's like anywhere from 1 Deltas, 1 Bravos, 1 Charlies, 1 Alphas. Okay. Yeah, they like change the AFSC. So if you see that, where it's like, oh yeah, I qualify for this AFSC or whatever, it will be like, there won't be 3 Ds or 3 Deltas on your list, and you'll be like, what's going on? And then you're oh, okay. So.
I see what you mean, yeah. So it just got changed?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Well, you mentioned this earlier, but can you explain the difference between the Air Force Reserve and the Air National Guard?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I can touch a little bit on it. Like I said, I've been in the reserve for a couple of months now, so I'm going to know based off the baseline knowledge. So as you probably know, the Air National Guard, it's funded by the state and federally, whereas like the Air Force Reserve is only federally funded. So I guess you would say, like, if you think about like natural disasters, civil unrest, like riots, anything pretty much crazy that's like a national, or not national, but like a statewide emergency, Air National Guard is pretty much going to respond to the call. Whereas Air Force Reserve is a little bit more like their active duty, or I guess you could say regular Air Force component, where the only thing that they're really going to get called for is like a national emergency type deal, where it's like you're actually going overseas and you're deploying, and that's really like all there is to it. So I guess if you don't want to have to be involved in all the like activation, like the state activations and that kind of thing, then the Guard might not be the best bet. However, when it comes to education benefits, I know that the Guard probably beats the Reserve, and I know that there is like hidden strings attached. So I wouldn't always take it for what it is. From what I understand, there was like Guard individual, like prior Guard that went into the Reserve for specific reasons. I couldn't really say it because I don't really recollect what it was, but I would just say be mindful of what the Guard is offering in terms of in-state tuition. Because I think when it comes to, I think it's called like Pell Grants and that kind of thing, where it's like in-state tuition, like they can cover, like, I want to understand most of it, if not all of it. Which obviously that can beat the Reserve by a long shot when it comes to education benefits. But there are some things that are underlying that you probably should kind of research. I don't know what it entails, and I know that seems like you're like, okay, well, what is it? I couldn't really tell you what it is, but all I'm saying is do your research. If they're offering in-state tuition completely paid for, to me, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, because if the Reserve is essentially the same thing as the Guard, as far as like you're only doing that 1 weekend a month, and like think about how that GI Bill works, where it's like to have your entire GI Bill covered, you need to do 36 months of active duty commitment. That kind of makes me scratch my head a little bit. I'm thinking like, why would the state cover it if the like fully cover it if like on a federal basis, like you need to do 36 or essentially 3 years of active duty service that you can qualify to get like federally funded. So I don't know. I mean, take it for what it is. That's just like kind of what I think about when it comes to Guard and Reserve.
Okay.
And then the big thing that I would say, and hopefully this doesn't discourage my fellow Guardsmen brethren or whatever, but essentially, when you are looking to career progress, I'll kind of paint you a picture on how active duty, or I guess you could say, we'll refer to it as regular Air Force from here on out. So what I did was regular Air Force.
Okay.
And why I say that is because active duty is a status. It's not an actual component. Active duty is like, because like technically right now I'm in active duty status, but I'm a reservist, if that makes sense. So regular Air Force, how it works with career progression. If you want to make the rank of like staff sergeant or technical sergeant, essentially you would have to actually test for that. So it's pretty competitive. And then from there, if you're trying to make like the senior ranks from there, like master sergeant, senior master sergeant, chief master sergeant in the regular Air Force, essentially you have to go before a board, and it could take quite a bit of time. Like, so to kind of paint you a picture on this, I'm a technical sergeant at this time. My supervisor was a technical sergeant, and she was in the regular Air Force for 19 years, and she was still a technical sergeant. Wow. She was trying to make master sergeant for about a good 10 years, and she did everything she was supposed to. I mean, she checked every single box and met every requirement, but it was just one of those things where they just kind of seemed like it wasn't like she was unfit at the time or whatever. So whereas on the reserve side, I came over here, and the first conference I went to, I had 3 chief master sergeants in my squadron, and mind you, on the regular Air Force side, there's like maybe 1 chief for your squadron. And then also there was like almost every single rank around me was a master sergeant or above on the reserve side. And on the regular Air Force side, you will see maybe a handful of like senior ranking officials, but you're not going, like, it's mostly going to be junior enlisted, like technical sergeant on down below. So essentially what I'm trying to tell you is they pretty much hand out rank like it's candy. It's career progression is very, very great in the reserve side. And Guard is even worse than regular Air Force based on what I hear. It's like You'll pretty much be waiting on a position until it's either somebody dies or, essentially somebody retires, because they pretty much secure that spot and they're not really going anywhere. So that's what I understand. A lot of guard transfers, like into the reserve, they'll transfer into the reserve for that very reason, where they're like, hey, I'm not going anywhere in my career. I can't get paid more. I can't do anything, and I'm stuck. And then they'll want to transfer over to the reserve. So it's kind of like a pros, cons, like, kind of weigh your risk to reward, like whatever is best for you and a better fit for you. That's kind of like what I would use to kind of make my determination.
You mentioned that you've been recruiting now for 2 months.
I'm sorry, you said 2 months I've been recruiting for the reserve?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So I've been doing about 2 months now, yep.
How are you dealing with the recruiting crisis we're currently facing?
Yeah, so as of right now, I'd say reserve is probably the safest component as far as recruiting numbers. And that's mainly because if you think about it, what is the lowest commitment level humanly possible when it comes to serving in the military, right? So active duty, that's intense. That's asking a lot of you, right? You're sacrificing, essentially family time. You're sacrificing a lot of your personal life in order to, obligate yourself to military service for many years. Whereas even though the reserve has a 6-year contract minimum, essentially you're really only, if you think about it, if you do 1 weekend a month and 2 weeks out of a year, I actually did the calculations, and that really only accumulates to maybe a year's worth of service. So technically you're not really doing a whole lot, and you're still in the Air Force. So it's a very low commitment level. And as you probably noticed, your colleagues and, your fellow schoolmates, they're not going to be really on the committed side. More than likely, they're probably going to be on the fence, a little bit on the flaky side. Now, that's where the reserve kind of comes in. You can be flexible. You can kind of do whatever. You can pretty much live the life that you were living before previously, and then just have that obligation of 1 weekend a month, which really isn't asking a whole lot. So more than likely, you're going to get a lot more individuals that are going to be signing up for the reserve instead of I guess you could say active duty Air Force, because not everyone is committed and, has that discipline to be able to be separated from their family and their friends and, have that whole thing going for them, a lot of, I'll give you an example, right? So I have had people where they said they wanted to join Air Force active duty. We got them all the way through the process. They were freaking excited. They were really on board. And then when it came time to ship date, I couldn't find them. I couldn't get a hold of them. And it was literally they jumped ship at the last second. So it's if you ever even feel like you have even the slightest inclination of that, kind of cold feet, don't do active duty. Bottom line, literally settle for reserve, because reserve is a lot lower commitment level, and it's you can technically take it for what it is. So that's kind of what my answer is with the recruiting crisis. Now, the medical side is pretty much the biggest enemy as of right now. It's not anything that anyone is really doing wrong. It's just a matter of are you qualified or are you not qualified? Is the medical process going to stop your tracks of enlisting, or is it going to delay your process entirely? So sometimes it's kind of one of those things where someone's on fire, they really, really want to join immediately. Yeah, I'm trying to leave tomorrow, man. All right, cool. But it's it's not that simple. It takes some time now. On average, you'll see, there's some uniforms, I'm not going to lie, where, they'll get through MEPS and somehow a week or something, and there's literally no prescription history that pops up or anything. But they're essentially aliens. I don't even know how it's really possible. But so that'll happen. But on average, you'd expect the average person that doesn't have many complications with their medical history, probably about 3 months, from start to finish, as far as getting in, enlisting, and going through the process. And then for your complicated ones, it could be 6 months and up. So yeah, and some people, as you could probably imagine, they're no, I'm done. I can't do this anymore, and they just give up. Oh, but we're so close, and they're no, I can't. So a lot of times you'll see that. So we're still getting people in. It's just it's an investment. It takes some time for us to get people in. It's not you're just gonna sign up today and then you're in. As much as we'd like it to happen that way, that's not necessarily the reality. So. Yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, sir.
Would you recommend the reserves, or either in the Air Force or in another service branch for college students?
So when it comes to like actually just education in general, I will always, and maybe it's just my bias, but I will always recommend the Air Force because, like I told you, as soon as you join the Air Force, you're automatically enrolled into the community college of the Air Force. No other branch has a community college, so it's just like that right there kind of tells you that if you're looking to kind of pursue education as like that's the forefront of what your goals are, like choose Air Force to begin with. Now, when it comes to the different components, like obviously if you're trying to pursue like full-time college for a degree that has to be in residence, like you kind of choose what's best for you. Like we're considered total force recruiters now, so like no matter if somebody wants to do regular Air Force or if they want to do guard or reserve, we're going to kind of get you on the right track depending on like what your goals are and what your needs are and like what's most comfortable for you. So it's just like if you have no problem recruiting from your family and like getting stationed somewhere and getting that experience or whatever, and by all means go regular Air Force. Like I'll say it all day until the cows come home. But it's like if you want to do like college full time and you want in residence, then maybe reserve or guard might be better for you. And then when it comes down to reserve and guard, it's just personal preference. Like based on your research, which one do you think would be best for you? And we kind of just like say, hey, this is what we got. You kind of go to the guard next, see what they got, and kind of just weigh your pros and cons. See which one you think would be better fit for you.
Where are the different bases in Virginia for reserve members?
So for reservists, there's literally only the one base in Virginia. It's just Langley Air Force Base. But we do actually. So this is where we're different from the Guard. So in the Guard, you're literally only going to be stationed at that state. Whereas on the reserve, we have that flexibility where we can literally relocate to different areas. So it's like if there's like, let's say there's a certain job you're looking for, which I don't really recommend you're looking for certain jobs just because it's kind of a vacancy list. We don't really know. We want you to overall be flexible. But essentially, like, let's say there is like maybe certain fields you're looking for, and let's say Langley doesn't have them. So Langley more than likely will probably have intel positions, but let's say maybe you want to kind of go the aircraft maintenance route or something like that. You want to work on jets. So if you want to work on jets, I know Seymour Johnson, Goldsboro, North Carolina, they have positions available for like aircraft mechanics and stuff like that. So does probably Andrews Air Force Base in Washington, D.C. area. Also, probably Dover, Delaware, if you want to work on like the heavy aircraft or like C-5, C-17s. I know Dover, Delaware has that or whatever. McGuire, New Jersey is another option. So typically, depending on like what you want your drive time to look like and like what is your motivation is really what we use to kind of determine like, hey, what base do you want to go to or whatever. And that's something the Guard can't provide. Like they're just going to say, hey, you can just do this based on what we have available in this state. So that's also another thing to consider when you're like thinking about the Guard and the reserve.
So just to be clear, no matter where you're located in Virginia, if you were assigned to Langley, you would have to drive to Langley?
All that way?
Yeah, so pretty much how it works is like, let's say you enlist or whatever. We do job counseling, you book your job, and then you enlist. So an officer would give you the oath of enlistment. Essentially, you'd be officially enlisted in the Air Force Reserve. And then from there, you would do your 1 weekend a month. And that 1 weekend a month would depend on where you're actually like assigned to. So you would be doing that. So like technically to kind of get more specific with you. So there's a guy that I just enlisted, the guy I was actually talking about. So he wanted to get into geospatial intel, which he did. But the thing is, because it's before basic training and he's still doing his 1 weekend a month before basic training, it's not necessarily where he would be reporting directly to the unit. It would be one of those things where it's a geographically separated unit because it's like preparing for basic training. So he would have to report for his drill weekends at Andrews, not at Langley. So that's in Washington, D.C. So he would do that before he goes to basic training. But once he finishes basic training, tech school, all that kind of stuff, then he'll start reporting at his unit at Langley. And he would be expected to drive to Langley 1 weekend a month.
Wow, okay. Yeah, so that's like a 4 to 5 hour drive for Luke and I.
Yeah, that's a good bit.
Yeah, so depending on, like it really just depends on what you value the most. Like, like if drive time is something that you see as kind of unfortunate or something that like it frustrates you, then you kind of want to go with whichever base is like closest to you. I mean, out of the bases that I mentioned, though, I mean, does it all kind of seem like around the same drive time?
Langley would be closer than
Langley,
base Andrews.
I think Langley would be closer, but I'm not sure. Like when it comes to surrounding states, there might be a closer one.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not really sure because
Yeah,
we
and
live in
that's
Southwest Virginia.
North Carolina's normally closer.
Yeah, and then honestly, like what I like to say as well is like depending on your level of commitment and that kind of thing. I mean, you do have to consider this is just one weekend a month. It's not like you're going to be driving up there every day. Yeah. So, I mean, and here's another thing, right? So when you do your drill weekend, they don't necessarily, and I think it's like an exception to policy, like case by case basis. Sometimes they might cover the gas, but I mean, I wouldn't expect it. More than likely, you would be expected to pay out of pocket for that. But as far as you actually being assigned for that weekend, like they're going to cover your food, they're going to cover your housing, all that kind of stuff. So it's not anything that you really need to worry about while you're there. So that's another thing to kind of consider as well.
I have. He said that you can deduct the gas mileage on your taxes, but you don't get reimbursed for it.
Yeah. So most of the case, most of the times that is the case. However, I think it's like if there's like a ridiculous amount of driving that you're doing, I think sometimes you might fall into some kind of clause, but don't quote me on that. Like I said, I've been in for like 2 months, so I'm still trying to work the process.
Of course, yeah. Okay, well, Luke and I have just a couple more questions.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah, as we're wrapping up here, and this is a non-military question. What is your advice for young people just making their way in the world, young adults? They really don't know what they want to do yet. They're just trying to find their way.
Well, I mean, what I would say is, kind of like what my dad used to tell me. So essentially, like, if you fail to plan, then you plan to fail. So like have different like plans ready, like, right? Like have a plan A, have a plan B, have a plan C, because that's something that I feel like I was always kind of on the fence, and the Air Force kind of helped me kind of make up my mind in a way, or it kind of just put me into something where it's just like, okay, make up your mind. Oh, no worries. And it just kind of threw me into something, and it just kind of made up my mind for me. So if you find yourself as like kind of a wishy-washy, kind of on the fence, you never really know like what you want to do kind of individual, it's not a bad idea to just kind of jump head first into the Air Force and kind of go from there. But it's like if you do have a game plan, you have a strategy in mind, like plan and well enough advanced at the time where it's like you actually can get it done in a certain amount of time. And it's like, just use the measurements as to what we use in the Air Force. So we call it SMART goals. So it's like an acronym. It stands for like specific, measurable, I think like attainable, realistic, and time bound. So use those to your advantage. Like actually be realistic with yourself for like what you expect to do. And like actually like reach out to individuals that like if you want to do like a particular career field, like reach out to them. Maybe do like a job shadow with them or whatever. See what their day to day is like, because it's just like if you have like just like kind of the idea of what you want to do, but you don't really have like the research or like what it actually looks like on a day to day, it can be very, very different from what you actually expect.
Yeah, that's true.
And that's one thing that I've actually seen in the Air Force. Like some people, they'll say, yeah, I want this job and I only want this job, which like I said, I don't condone that at all. Like I'm not a big advocate of job locked individuals. Typically that's not what we're looking for. But let's just say, hey, they want a job where it's like specific to a certain area and it's all they've ever wanted to do, but it's like they've done absolutely no research in it and they just think it's like cool or something. And I'm like, all right, cool. So we'll put them in that job, and it's just like they could end up being one of those individuals that's disgruntled at the end of their tour, where they're just like, oh man, the Air Force screwed me over because like they put me in this career field. And it's like dude, like you literally wanted to do that job. It's just like you didn't invest time to kind of like research and see what it was about ahead of time. But it's just like, and it's also like on the other side of things, it could be the complete other way around. Like you could get slotted for a job, you're just like, oh man, this job's gonna suck or whatever. And it's just like, it's probably like the most rewarding job ever that completely hooks you up for the outside. So it's just like, it's one of those things where you definitely want to kind of do your research ahead of time. And I'm not even talking about Air Force specifically. Do your research ahead of time, have a plan A, a plan B, a plan C, and be realistic with yourself, right? Like, I don't know if, I'm not going to get into this whole today's generation type deal because I know it's like a little bit different. And I understand that people have parents from different generations. I know when I was in high school, I think my parents were probably like a generation that was a little bit older. So I was raised a little bit more old school than my classmates. But essentially, I don't know if the parents really are asking, or the parents or the teachers or, the mentors, the coaches, whoever it may be, if they're asking the important questions, like, hey, is this realistic? Like, that's the main thing that you want to, like, definitely visualize going in. Because I think, so to kind of give you a little bit of backstory, right? So when I was in high school, I was involved in the fine arts or whatever. I did, like, theater, musical type stuff, show choir, competitive speech, all that kind of stuff. I maybe at one point in time, I thought that I was pretty good. I had what it took, and it was going to take me places. But like my dad and that kind of thing, and it's not necessarily like crushing dreams or whatever, but it's just like understand like what people are looking for, understand the statistics of like how many people get actually hired into those positions and that kind of thing, and how realistic it actually is. And it's like, if you take the time to kind of like talk to individuals in those fields, or like, do your research, you'll understand that, what you're getting yourself into may or may not pan out. Because, like, look, you'll have individuals that they'll knock out that 4-year degree at university. And they're like, hey, man, I got my piece of paper, I got my diploma or whatever. But it's just like, they didn't really do that research. They didn't really understand, like they just did it to kind of check a box. And it's like, yeah, good, you got your degree, but like, what kind of hands-on experience do you have? What can you bring to the table? Who's going to hire you? And that's like a lot of people that are even my age, like they'll have their bachelor's or masters and I don't know, like psychology or whatever the case might be. And it's just like, they don't even know what to do with themselves after that. Like, they're just kind of at a standstill. And it's like, to kind of prevent that from happening, like, definitely do the work to like research and know ahead of time what you're getting yourself into. Because it's like, if you're pursuing a major that people aren't really looking to hire into, like, you might want to kind of change your degree of study. I mean, that's not me trying to crush people's dreams or whatever. It's me. Not realistic with y'all. So, but honestly, my advice, it's coming from a place of love, honestly, because I believe that if someone truly loves you and cares about you, they're going to poke holes in your plans, right? They're going to tell you, like, the important things, the things that you need to know, not the things that, I don't want to hurt so-and-so's feelings because, they're not going to think that much of me anymore. But it's just like, no, like, honestly, if you truly do care about someone, you're going to tell them, exactly what they need to hear, even if it's maybe what they don't want to hear. You know what I mean? So that's kind of like what my advice is on that.
Yeah. Okay. And then our last question.
We ask every interviewee this question, Ethan.
Yeah. And what is the meaning of life to you?
So the meaning of life is, it's pretty much based in my faith or whatever. So I don't want to get like too unprofessional with this or whatever, but
of course,
it's pretty much just the kind of just love your neighbor as yourself type deal. Like when it comes to me with recruiting, I think the bigger picture is it's a people business. It's about people. It's about looking out for your fellow man or woman and really just helping them out through like any kind of endeavor that they have. And, sometimes I can help people and sometimes it sucks. Like, I can't help people. But at the end of the day, like, I will do my darndest to, like, actually help people. Even if it's one of those things where they're disqualified or whatever, I'll look for an alternative way, or I'll try to find another way. Because really, I think it's just about, we're all in this together and we're really just trying to help each other. And, like, whether, it be sometimes failure and sometimes success, you pick up your fellow brethren, your fellow sister, and you dust them off and you help them out. It's really just about helping people and loving people and caring about people. That's what I think the meaning of life is. So
yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you for that.
Thank you, sir. Well, sir, thank you for coming on and talking to us this evening. It's been a pleasure and an honor.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you guys have any further questions, feel free to contact me at this number. And yeah, I mean, I wouldn't mind having access to this interview or whatever. I don't know.
Oh, of course,
absolutely.
It's classified or whatever. But, yeah.
Oh, no, not at all. I'll be sure to send it to you.
Okay, awesome. Well, yeah, thank you so much for, the time that I got to actually share with you my experience and then also information about the Air Force. And, I look forward to hearing from you guys in the future.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir.